The ring had been on her finger for 4 years. Vivian Myers took it off in under 3 seconds. Not quietly, not privately. In the middle of a room full of Atlanta's finest lawyers, donors, people whose opinions Cole had spent his entire career curating, Vivian reached across, gripped Eileen's hand, and pulled. The room went still. Cole stood near the fireplace. He watched. He did not move. Eileen did not flinch. She did not pull back. She looked at Vivian the way you look at something you have already accounted for, the way you look at a problem you solved weeks ago. This family has a name to protect, Eileen. Vivian said loud enough for every person in that room to hear. You were never part of that plan. Nobody spoke, and Eileen quietly, without a single word, smiled. Not because she was powerless, because they had absolutely no idea. Before we go any further, if this story's already hitting something in your chest, drop your country and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and give this channel a like. It helps more than you know, and there is so much more coming. Now, let's go back to where this really started. Nobody in the Myers family ever said it plainly. They didn't have to. It was in the way Vivian set the dinner table. 12 chairs, 11 place cards, Eileen's name written in pencil, while everyone else got ink. It was in the way she greeted Cole at the door with both hands and greeted Eileen with a glance that started at her shoes and ended somewhere just below satisfied. It was in the pause before Vivian introduced her at charity events, that half second too long, that slight tilt of the head as if she were still deciding how to explain the situation. This is Cole's wife. Not daughter-in-law, not Eileen. Just wife, a title, a placeholder. Eileen noticed. She always noticed. She just never said anything. That was the thing about Eileen Myers that nobody in that family ever understood. Her silence was not surrender. It looked like it. It had the shape of it. She would sit at the far end of the table while Vivian held court, would nod. When Cole's colleague spoke over her, would fold her hands in her lap, when Vivian redirected conversations away from her mid-sentence. From the outside, it looked like a woman who had accepted her place. It wasn't. It was a woman who was paying very close attention. The first year of marriage, Cole apologized often. You know how she is. She doesn't mean it like that. He would say it in the car on the way home, one hand on the wheel, not quite looking at her, and Eileen would nod. She would look out the window at Atlanta moving past in the dark, and she would nod and she would file it not. Forgive not, forget, just file in the place she kept things that mattered. By the second year, he stopped apologizing as often. By the third, he had started to speak to her the way Vivian spoke to her. Not cruelly, just past her, through her, like she was furniture that had learned to answer questions. There was a dinner in October of their third year. Cole's firm was celebrating a partnership announcement, and Vivian had organized the event herself at their house because of course she had. 47 guests, catered. The kind of evening where everyone wore something that cost more than some people's rent. Eileen had cooked for 3 days preparing the appetizers. Vivian arrived 2 hours before guests and had the catering staff replace every dish. I didn't think you'd mind, Vivian said without looking up from the seating chart. The presentation needed to be consistent. Cole was on a call in the study. Eileen stood in the kitchen doorway, looked at 4 glass containers of her food sitting on the counter, waiting to be thrown away, and felt something move through her, something cold and very clear. She did not say a word. She went upstairs, changed into the black dress Vivian had once called a little plain, don't you think? Came back down and spent the evening making every guest feel like the most interesting person in the room. By 10 o'clock, 3 of Cole's senior partners had told him directly, without prompting, that his wife was remarkable. Vivian spent the rest of the night rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging. The photograph appeared on a Tuesday. Cole had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. A notification slid across the screen, not a message, just a preview. A name, Tara, and below it the top edge of an image that Eileen did not need to see the rest of to understand. She looked at it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she placed the phone face down exactly where Cole had left it and went back to her coffee. She did not confront him that morning. She did not confront him that week. She did not search the name, did not check his email, did not do any of the things that a woman with no plan would do, because a woman with no plan looks for evidence to confirm her pain. Eileen was looking for something else entirely. She picked up her own phone, opened her contacts, scrolled to a name she had not called in several weeks, Patricia. She typed 2 words and sent them before she finished her coffee. It's time. Patricia Holt had been Eileen's family's attorney for 22 years. She had written Theodore Warren Sr.'s will. She had sat at his bedside in those last weeks and listened to a man who had built a $72 billion empire from a single logistics contract tell her quietly that the only thing he was afraid of was leaving his granddaughter unprotected. Make it invisible, he had told Patricia, until she needs it. Patricia had made it invisible. For 4 years, Eileen Myers had walked into rooms where people calculated her worth and come up empty. For 4 years, she had smiled at charity galas where her name opened no doors. She had signed documents Cole slid in front of her cooked food that got replaced, worn a ring on a finger that someone else apparently felt entitled to remove. For 4 years, she had been exactly who they thought she was, a woman with nothing. The notification on Cole's phone was not the reason she sent that message to Patricia. The decision had been made months before, made carefully, made quietly, the way her grandfather had taught her to make every decision that actually mattered. But Tuesday was the day she let herself acknowledge it. The coffee was still warm. Outside, Atlanta was already loud and bright and moving. She turned the phone face up again, saw the notification was gone, and rinsed her mug in the sink. Cole came downstairs 20 minutes later, kissed her on the cheek, picked up his phone without a word, and left for work. She watched his car pull out of the driveway. Somewhere across the city, in an office on the 14th floor of a building that Eileen quietly owned 3 floors, of Patricia Holt read 2 words on a screen, set down her pen, and began to make calls. The girl he chose thought she had nothing. He had no idea what he had chosen to walk away from. The call came at 7:14 in the morning. Eileen was standing at the window in the second bedroom, the one Cole had converted into a home office 3 years ago and used maybe 4 times since. She came here sometimes when the house felt too much like his. The light was different in this room. Softer. It came in at an angle that made the whole space feel like it belonged to someone else's life. Someone quieter. Someone who had not spent 4 years calculating the precise distance between patience and its end. Her phone buzzed once. She looked at the screen. Patricia Holt. She picked up on the second ring. The trust activates in 11 days, Eileen. Patricia's voice was the same as it always was, even unhurried, the voice of a woman who had delivered difficult news and extraordinary news with identical calm for 2 decades. Everything is in order. The documentation is complete. Warren Family Trust, LLC, is ready to transfer full beneficial ownership on the date your grandfather specified. Eileen did not speak immediately. Outside the window, a neighbor was walking a dog. A delivery truck moved slowly down the street. Somewhere in the house, the coffee maker clicked and hissed. 11 days, she said finally. 11 days, Patricia confirmed. Is there anything you need from me before then? Eileen thought about Cole's phone on the counter 2 mornings ago. She thought about the name Tara sliding across the screen. She thought about the dinner in October and the pencil instead of ink and the half-second pause before wife. Keep everything where it is, Eileen said, and don't move anything yet. Understood. She hung up, stood at the window a moment longer, and then so small that no one would have seen it even if anyone had been watching. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a full smile. Not quite. More like the expression of a person who has been holding a door closed against a very strong wind for a very long time and has just felt the wind begin to shift. 11 days. She just had to hold on 11 more days. The invitation arrived by text that same afternoon. Vivian. Dinner this Saturday. The house. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Eileen Cole has an announcement. No greeting. No question mark. A summons dressed as a message. Eileen read it twice, set her phone face down on the counter, and began chopping vegetables for a meal she would eat alone. Cole had texted earlier, working late, don't wait up, and she hadn't replied. She cooked anyway. Set one place at the table, sat down in the quiet of the kitchen with the city moving outside the window, and ate slowly, without music, without television, just the sound of her own silverware against the plate. This was something she had learned from her grandfather. Silence is not empty, Eileen. It's where you hear yourself think. She had been thinking very clearly for months now. Saturday arrived gray and close, the kind of Atlanta evening that couldn't decide whether to rain. Vivian's house was lit up from the street warm light in every window, 2 cars Eileen didn't recognize in the driveway beside Cole's. She sat in her own car for a moment before going in. Not out of nerves, out of habit. Her grandfather used to say, enter every room knowing why you're there. She knew exactly why she was there. To watch. Inside, the house smelled like catered food and expensive candles. 8 people already in the living room. Cole's sister and her husband, 2 of Vivian's friends from the symphony board, a junior partner from Cole's firm, and his wife. All the right people. All the people Vivian had assembled Eileen understood for a specific purpose. Cole was near the fireplace. He looked up when Eileen walked in, crossed the room, kissed her cheek. Formal. The kiss of a man performing a role. "Glad you came," he said, as if she'd had a choice. She was standing near the bookshelf with a glass of water she rarely drank at Vivian's, another small habit of self-preservation, when she saw her. Tara Weston? She was exactly what Eileen had expected. Tall, easy in a room, the kind of woman who knew how to make entering feel like an event. She wore burgundy form-fitting deliberate, and she moved through the living room the way someone moves through a space they have already rehearsed. Vivian greeted her at the door with both hands. Both hands. The same greeting she had never once given Eileen in 4 years. Eileen watched this from across the room with the glass of water cool against her palm and felt not surprise, not hurt, something quieter, the feeling of a thing you have suspected being confirmed in handwriting you already recognized. She had known this woman existed. She had known in the particular way that wives know things before they are ready to say them aloud that Tara Weston had been in her marriage for longer than this evening. What she had not expected was the seating arrangement. Tara was placed at the dining table in the chair that had been Eileen's for 4 years, right side of Cole, between him and Vivian's seat at the head. Eileen was redirected without a word to the far end of the table by Vivian's friend who just wanted to catch up. Dinner proceeded. Cole laughed at things Tara said. Vivian touched Tara's arm 3 times during the main course. The announcement turned out to be Cole's promotion to senior partner, a thing Eileen had known about for 2 weeks because she had overheard the call, and when the table raised their glasses, Vivian's eyes went to Tara first. Eileen raised her glass of water, said congratulations to her husband clearly enough for everyone at the table to hear, and then looked down at the food in front of her and thought 10 days. She did not speak in the car on the way home. Cole did not apologize. He talked about the promotion, about the dinner, about how his mother really did have a gift for hosting. He talked the way people talk when they are hoping the other person will fill in the silence with something that lets them off the hook. Eileen looked out the window at Atlanta moving past in the dark. She thought about 11 days becoming 10. She thought about Patricia's voice, everything is in order. She thought about her grandfather sitting at a mahogany desk signing a document with hands that shook slightly, by then saying, "She will know when it's time." Cole pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, sat there a moment. "You okay?" he asked. She turned and looked at him. Really looked at the jaw she had once found beautiful, at the eyes that had once looked at her like she was something worth protecting, at the man who had stood near a fireplace and watched his mother take a ring off his wife's finger and done nothing would do. Nothing, had chosen nothing over and over and called it keeping the peace. "I'm fine," she said. She got out of the car and walked inside. 10 days. She kept the box in the back of the closet in the second bedroom. Not hidden exactly. Just placed where no one who wasn't looking for it would think to look. A dark green document box, the kind with a brass clasp, and a small lock that required a key she wore on a chain beneath her shirt every day of her 4-year marriage. Cole had never asked about it. That was the thing about people who believed they already knew everything worth knowing about you. They stopped looking. They stopped asking. The box had sat in that closet for 4 years untouched, the way certain truths sit inside people for years before the moment arrives that requires them. Tonight, for the first time, Eileen opened it. She had been 9 years old when her parents died. A highway in November, a rain that came in too fast, a truck that crossed the center line. She remembered the shoes she had been wearing that day, white sneakers with a Velcro strap, one of them coming slightly loose. She remembered the school hallway, the principal's office, the particular quality of light through frosted glass. She did not remember who told her or what they said. Her brain had quietly removed that part, like a careful editor cutting the frame that would do the most damage. What she remembered was her grandfather's hands. Theodore Warren Sr. had arrived at the school within the hour. He was 61 years old, and he moved like a man who had decided long ago that the world would arrange itself around him rather than the other way around. He did not cry in front of her. He sat beside her on a plastic chair in the principal's office, took both her hands in his large hands, warm the texture of someone who had worked with them long before. Money made that unnecessary, and said very quietly, "You are going to be all right, Eileen. Not today. But you're going to be all right." She had believed him immediately, not because she was naive, because he said it the way people say things they have already arranged to be true. He raised her in the house on Peachtree Road, a house that had always felt to Eileen less like a home and more like a statement. All high ceilings and dark wood and rooms that smelled like leather and old paper. But her grandfather had made it warm in the ways that mattered. He ate breakfast with her every morning before she went to school. He came to every recital, every graduation, Every small ceremony that adults sometimes think children won't remember, but children always remember. He taught her chess and then stopped letting her lose on purpose by the time she was 11. He taught her to read a balance sheet the same week he taught her to drive. A woman who understands money, he told her once, can never be made to feel small by someone who only has it. She had written that in the margin of a notebook she still had somewhere. When she was 26, he called her into his study, the real study, the one she wasn't allowed in as a child, the one with the filing cabinets that required 2 keys and the desk that had belonged to his own father, and showed her the trust documents for the first time. I built this for you, he said simply. Not for the name, not for the legacy, for you specifically, because you are the only person I have ever met who I am certain will not be destroyed by it. She had sat across from him and read every page, all 47 of them. He waited without speaking, refilling his coffee once patient, in the way of a man who understood that some documents required the respect of being read completely. When she finished, she looked up. Why not now? She asked. He had smiled that particular smile, the one that lived mostly in his eyes. Because you haven't needed it yet, and the moment you need it is the moment you'll know exactly what to do with it. He passed away 8 months later, quietly in the Peachtree Roadhouse in the chair by the window, where he liked to read in the mornings. Patricia had called her at 6 a.m. and said he went in his sleep. Eileen, it was peaceful, and Eileen had sat on the edge of her bed and held the phone long after the call ended and felt the specific shape of a world with one less person in it who truly knew her. She had met Cole 4 months after that. She had married him 6 months after that. She had never told him about the trust. The documents were exactly as she remembered. 47 pages, crisp and precise, Patricia's signature on the last page beside her grandfather's, the Warren Family Trust, LLC, beneficial ownership transferring to Eileen Christine Myers, née Warren, upon her 33rd birthday 11 days from now, as of this morning's call. She sat cross-legged on the floor of the second bedroom with the box open in her lap and read through the pages slowly. Not because she didn't know what they said, because they deserved to be read that way, because her grandfather had sat across from a 26-year-old girl and waited in silence while she read every word, and that was a thing worth honoring. Outside, Cole was watching television in the living room. She could hear the low murmur of it through the wall, some sports recap, the occasional burst of commentary. An ordinary Tuesday night in an ordinary marriage. He had no idea what was in this room. She reached the final page, read her grandfather's signature, Theodore Warren Sr., in the handwriting she had known since childhood. Slightly forward-leaning, unhurried, the signature of a man who had never needed to prove anything to anyone. She pressed her palm flat against the page for a moment. I know, she said softly to no one in the room, or perhaps to someone who was no longer in any room. I know what to do. She closed the box, clicked the brass clasp shut, put it back in the closet behind the winter coats exactly where it had always been. Then she walked out of the room, down the hallway, and into the kitchen to make tea like nothing had happened. Because nothing had. Not yet. But in 9 days everything would. Patricia called on a Wednesday afternoon 3 days after the dinner at Vivian's. Eileen was at the dry cleaner 2 blocks from the house picking up Cole's suits, 3 of them, his preferred charcoal, the navy he wore to depositions, and a new one she didn't recognize that he must have dropped off himself. She was standing at the counter, card in hand, when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, stepped away from the counter. Talk to me, she said. Patricia did not lead with pleasantries. She never did when it mattered. I was doing the standard pre-activation audit on the trust, cross-referencing your personal financial records the way we do before any major transfer to make sure nothing is attached that shouldn't be. A pause, the kind Patricia used when she was choosing words carefully. Eileen, I need you to tell me if you have ever taken out a private loan. Any loan. Anything signed in your name in the last 3 years. The dry cleaner called her number. She held up one finger without turning around. No, she said. Nothing. Another pause. That's what I was afraid of. Cole Marcus Myers had 14 months ago signed Eileen's name to a private lending agreement for $2.3 million. Patricia walked her through it, methodically. The lender, a private equity contact of Cole's, the date the account the funds were deposited into the subsequent wire transfer 11 days later to a property holding company registered in Georgia. The signature on the loan agreement was Eileen's name in handwriting that was close but not exact. The E two-rounded the Y, descending at the wrong angle. Close enough to pass a casual review. Not close enough to pass Patricia Holt. He used your name, Patricia said. Your credit, your identity, and the funds went directly into an LLC that purchased a condominium in Buckhead. Eileen was outside now. She didn't remember walking out. She was standing on the sidewalk with Cole's dry cleaning over one arm and the afternoon sun pressing down on the back of her neck, and the city moving around her like it always did, indifferent, continuous, loud. "What's the name of the LLC?" Patricia told her. Eileen knew the address. She had driven past it once with Cole on the way to a restaurant, and he had pointed at the building, not the unit. Not specifically just the building, and said something about the neighborhood appreciating. She had thought nothing of it at the time. She was thinking something very specific about it now. "Who owns the unit?" "The LLC," Patricia said. "But I pulled the registered agent. It's a name you'll recognize." She already knew, but she let Patricia say it. Tara Weston. The sidewalk did not move. The traffic did not stop. The city continued exactly as it had a moment before. Eileen stood in it and breathed. She had known about Tara in the abstract, the name on the phone, the woman in her chair at Vivian's table, the burgundy dress moving through a room like it belonged there. She had known the shape of the betrayal, but there is a difference between knowing the shape of something and being handed the exact documents that give it weight and dimension, and a dollar amount and a forged signature with your name on it. He had not just taken another woman into her marriage. He had used her name to do it. Her name? The name she had brought into this house, the name her grandfather had made mean something before she was old enough to understand what it protected, the name she had signed carefully on 47 pages of trust documentation and on one prenuptial agreement that Cole had skimmed for 11 minutes before initialing. Her name, signed in his handwriting. On a loan she had never agreed to. For an apartment he had given to someone else. She felt something move through her that was not quite anger. Anger was too simple. This was something more structural, the feeling of a final piece sliding into place of a question she had been holding for months, receiving its answer in the clearest possible terms. She shifted the dry cleaning to her other arm. "Patricia?" she said. Her voice was even. She was aware of this the way she was aware of her own heartbeat, steady, deliberate, nothing wasted. "Send me everything." Already compiling it. All of it. The loan agreement, the LLC registration, the wire transfer records, the property deed, everything. "You'll have it by 6. She looked at the building across the street. A woman pushing a stroller. 2 men in suits talking outside a coffee shop. The ordinary geometry of a Wednesday. "One more thing," she said. "The NDA." A beat. "What NDA?" Patricia asked, and the slight shift in her tone told Eileen it was a real question, not a deflection. "Find it," Eileen said. "Cole didn't do this alone, and he didn't do it quietly. A man like Cole doesn't bring someone into his life the way he brought Tara Weston without paperwork. He's a lawyer. He documents everything. Find the agreement." There was a pause on Patricia's end, the specific pause of a woman recalibrating. "Give me 48 hours. "You have 24. She hung up, walked back inside the dry cleaner, paid for the suits, carried them to her car, laid them across the back seat with the same care she always did, Cole's navy on top, the charcoal beneath. She drove home, made dinner, set the table for 2. When Cole came home at 7:15, she asked about his day, the way she always did, listened to the answer, the way she always did, passed him the bread without being asked, because she had learned after 4 years exactly when he wanted it. He looked relaxed, comfortable, the look of a man who believed his house was in order. She watched him across the table and thought about a forged letter E, too rounded, the Y descending at the wrong angle. He had not even bothered to practice. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing something not enough, never enough. She met his eyes and smiled the way her grandfather had taught her to smile when the answer was something the other person wasn't ready to hear. "Everything is fine, Cole," she said. She picked up her fork. "Everything is absolutely fine." Patricia found the NDA in 19 hours. It had been filed through a third-party legal services company, the kind of firm that handled sensitive agreements for clients who preferred their names not appear on the paperwork directly. Cole had been careful. He had used a personal email account rather than his firm address, paid the filing fee through a private account Eileen hadn't known existed, and structured the agreement through a Delaware shell entity that on paper had nothing to do with him. He had been careful. He had not been careful enough. Patricia Holt had spent 22 years reading documents that people had spent considerable effort making unreadable. She had in that time developed a specific and highly refined patience for the places where careful men became careless, the registration dates that didn't align, the agent names that appeared twice in unrelated filings, the phone numbers that traced back one step further than intended. Cole had left 3 of these. She had found all of them before noon. She called Eileen at 2:47 in the afternoon. Non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. She said executed 18 months ago between Cole Myers acting through Warren Street Consulting, LLC, his shell entity, and Tara Weston. She agreed not to disclose the nature of their relationship, not to contact his professional associates, and not to make any claims against him personally or professionally in exchange for a monthly payment of $4,000 deposited into an account in her name. Eileen was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. He's been paying her, she said, every month for 18 months, auto transfer. The account the payments come from is the same account that received the wire from the forged loan. The loop closed cleanly. The $2.3 million borrowed in Eileen's name had purchased Tara a condominium and funded a monthly payment structured to keep her quiet and compliant. It was, Eileen thought, the kind of arrangement that required a specific type of coldness to construct, not heat, not passion, not even cruelty exactly. Just the methodical architecture of a man who had looked at the people in his life and calculated their cost. She had been a line item. She just hadn't known which one. "Patricia," she said, "how long until the trust activates?" 8 days. Then we have 8 days to build everything. They worked in Patricia's office on the 14th floor. Eileen came every morning at 9 and left at 6, telling Cole she was volunteering with a literacy program, something she had actually done 2 years ago, something he would not think to verify because it fit the version of her he had already decided on. The woman with quiet hobbies. The woman with no demands. The woman who filled the background of his life without complicating the foreground. She sat across from Patricia and they built the file together. The forged loan agreement, original document forensic handwriting analysis from a specialist Patricia retained on Tuesday comparison against 12 authenticated samples of Eileen's signature from other documents over the past 4 years. The conclusion was unambiguous. The signature was not hers. The NDA, full documentation of the shell entity, the payment trail, the connection back to the loan account. A thread that once pulled unraveled with the particular efficiency of something constructed by a man who believed he would never be audited. The property deed for the Buckhead condominium purchased 11 days after the loan transfer, titled to the LLC registered agent Tara Weston. Purchased with money borrowed in Eileen's name without her knowledge or consent. The prenuptial agreement, specifically the clause clear and unambiguous in Patricia's precise legal language that any debt incurred by either party without the written consent of the other was the sole liability of the party who incurred it. Cole had signed this. He had initialed the page it appeared on. He had done so 11 minutes after receiving the document in the lobby of Patricia's building, because he had believed there was nothing in it worth reading carefully. By Thursday, they had 412 pages. Eileen sat back in the chair across from Patricia's desk and looked at the stack. "Is it enough?" Patricia looked at her over the rim of her glasses with the expression of a woman who did not deal in approximations. "It is more than enough." She filed the divorce petition on a Friday morning. Not at Patricia's office. At the courthouse in person because her grandfather had told her once that the things that matter should be done in person. She wore the dark navy dress. She carried the filing herself, a sealed envelope, Patricia's name on the return address, Eileen's signature on the certification page inside. The clerk stamped it at 11:43 a.m. She thanked him, walked back through the marble lobby and out into the Atlanta morning, and stood on the courthouse steps for a moment with the sun on her face. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel sad. She felt the specific clarity of a person who has been moving towards something for a very long time and has just taken the last step that cannot be untaken. She texted Patricia 2 words, "It's filed." Patricia responded immediately, "Good. 7 days." That evening, Cole came home at his usual time tie, loosened the charcoal suit from the dry cleaner, a takeout bag from the tie place on Peachtree that they both liked. He set it on the counter, called her name, and she answered from the living room. They ate together at the kitchen table. He talked about a deposition that had run long, about a junior associate who kept missing deadlines, about his mother wanting to plan a trip to Charleston in the spring. Eileen listened, asked a question about the deposition at the right moment, laughed briefly at the associate story, said Charleston sounded nice. He looked at her across the table, the look he sometimes got, the one she had once believed was love and had later understood was simply comfort, the look of a man checking that his life was where he left it. Everything was where he left it. He ate his dinner. He did not know the courthouse had his name on a document with a stamp from that morning. He did not know that 412 pages of evidence had been organized into a file with tabs and index markers. He did not know that in 7 days a trust worth $72 billion would transfer beneficial ownership to the woman sitting across from him, eating pad thai with her left hand, the pale mark where her ring used to sit still faintly visible on her finger. He finished dinner, complimented the food he had ordered himself, carried his plate to the sink and rinsed it the way he always did. "Good day?" he asked, not quite looking at her. She picked up her own plate. "Productive," she said. He nodded, already moving toward the living room. She washed her dish, dried it, placed it back in the cabinet. 7 days. Vivian Myers had spent 40 years building a room. Not a physical room, though she was skilled at those too, at the precise arrangement of furniture and flowers and lighting that communicated exactly the right things to exactly the right people. The room she had spent 40 years building was social, architectural in its own way. A careful construction of names and affiliations and appearances maintained with the same attention a gardener gives to something that will die if neglected for even a single season. Cole's career was a pillar of that room. His marriage was supposed to be a wall. Eileen had always been the wrong material. The party was called a celebration. Cole's promotion to senior partner at the firm, the announcement Vivian had previewed at the dinner 2 weeks prior, now formalized into an event she had organized with the particular thoroughness she reserved for things that were really about her. Invitations had gone out 10 days ago, 41 guests, catered by the same company that handled the Symphony Board's annual gala. The house on Brookhaven Drive opened up the back rooms connected by borrowed tables draped in white linen flower arrangements that had required 3 conversations with the florist. Eileen had received her invitation by text. Saturday, 7. Dress appropriately. She arrived at 7 exactly. Not early, she had learned in 4 years that arriving early at Vivian's meant being put to work in ways that would later be described to others as helpfulness. Not lateness gave Vivian a grievance to carry through the evening like a gift she hadn't asked for, but intended to use. 7 exactly. The door opened before she knocked. Vivian looked at her dress, the dark navy, the one she always wore, the one Vivian had once called plain, and her expression did the thing it always did. Not quite disdain. Something more refined. The look of a woman who has trained herself to communicate disapproval through the architecture of her face rather than anything as uncontrolled as words. "Eileen," she said, "you came." As though there had been a possibility she wouldn't. Inside the room was already moving. 41 people in the warm light, the low furniture pushed to the walls. Cole near the center of it all, with a drink in his hand, and the look he wore at these events relaxed. Deliberate, the look of a man who understood that being watched was part of the work. He saw Eileen come in, nodded once, did not cross the room. She got a glass of water from the bar. Found a position near the bookshelf, her usual geometry at these events, the place from which she could see the entire room without being in the center of it. Her grandfather had taught her that too. The most useful place in any room is the one where you can see everything and be underestimated doing it. She saw Tara Weston arrive at 7:20. Burgundy again? Different dress, same color. Eileen wondered if it was intentional, a signature, a statement, or simply a woman who knew what worked and repeated it. She watched Vivian greet her at the door. Both hands. The warm smile Eileen had never received. Cole moved toward Tara within 2 minutes, the same smooth drift of a man rearranging himself around a gravitational center he had chosen. Eileen watched all of it from the bookshelf with her water glass. She was not angry. Or rather, she was angry, had been angry for longer than she could now precisely locate, but the anger had long since been refined into something more useful, more precise. Anger in its raw form was loud and expensive. What she carried now was quieter, more structural, the kind that builds things rather than breaks them. 4 days, she thought. Dinner was served at 8:30. Eileen found her place card at the far end of the table, rearranged from 2 weeks ago, even further now, between one of Vivian's symphony friends and a man she had never met, who turned out to be a city councilman, whose name she filed away automatically out of habit. Cole sat at the center, Vivian at the head. Tara to Cole's right. The announcement came between the main course and dessert. Vivian stood, raised her glass, and delivered 3 minutes about legacy and excellence and the Myers name and what it meant to this city. She talked about Cole's father, who had been a judge. She talked about her own work on the symphony and hospital boards. She talked about the future, what this promotion meant, what it pointed toward the trajectory of a family that had always understood its obligations to Atlanta's leadership. She did not mention Eileen once. Not her name, not a glance, not the grammatical accommodation of our family or Cole and his wife. 41 people in the room who all knew Eileen was Cole's wife, and Vivian spoke for 3 minutes about Cole's life as though that fact did not exist. Cole raised his glass, smiled, did not look at the far end of the table. The room applauded. Eileen touched her water glass to her lips. 3 days. It happened at 9:47. Dessert had been cleared. The room had loosened into smaller conversations. Eileen was speaking with the councilman, a genuine conversation, as it turned out about a zoning proposal she had actually read about in the paper when she felt the shift in the room's attention before she understood its source. Vivian's voice carrying above the ambient noise with the precision of a woman who had spent decades learning exactly how loud to be. I think we all know this family is at a turning point. She was standing in the center of the room, not addressing anyone specifically, addressing everyone specifically. Cole has worked his entire life for what he's achieving, and the people standing beside him, the people who will be part of this next chapter, her eyes moved across the room, settled briefly on Tara, moved on. Those are the people who belong here, who have always belonged here. The room was not quite silent, but it was listening. Eileen set down her water glass. Vivian walked toward her. She moved through the room with the confidence of a woman executing a plan she had rehearsed, and Eileen understood watching her come that this moment had been constructed. The party, the seating arrangement, the speech, Tara in the same chair, and now this. A performance with an audience of 41. Vivian stopped in front of her, reached out, took Eileen's left hand in both of hers, the same gesture she used to greet Tara at the door, now inverted, weaponized, and before Eileen fully processed the intention, Vivian's fingers found the ring and pulled. Not roughly, worse than roughly, deliberately. Slowly enough that every person in the immediate vicinity understood exactly what was happening. The ring came free. Vivian held it between two fingers, looked at it the way you look at something you are returning to its rightful owner. Then she looked at Eileen directly without apology, with the full weight of 40 years of a room she had built and intended to protect. This family has a name to protect, Eileen, she said quietly. Quiet enough to be intimate, loud enough to be heard. You were never part of that plan. 41 people in the room. Not one of them spoke. Eileen looked at Vivian's hand, at the ring, at the woman holding it with the certainty of someone who believed she had just won something. She did not reach for it. She did not raise her voice. She looked at Vivian Myers the way her grandfather had once looked at a man who had tried to renegotiate a signed contract with a patient so absolute it functioned as a threat, and said nothing. Because there was nothing she needed to say tonight. In 3 days, the world would say it for her. The trust activated on a Tuesday. Eileen woke at 6 before the alarm, the way she always did on mornings when something significant was about to happen. She lay still for a moment in the gray light, listening to Cole breathe beside her, the slow, untroubled rhythm of a man with no idea what day it was. Not the date, the significance of it. The particular weight this Tuesday carried that no other Tuesday in his life would ever match. She got up quietly, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window while the city assembled itself in the early light below. At 6:41, her phone buzzed. A single message from Patricia: "It's done. Warren Family Trust, LLC, has transferred full beneficial ownership to Eileen Christine Myers as of 12:01 a.m. this morning. Congratulations." Eileen read it twice, set the phone face down on the counter, picked up her coffee, drank it slowly. Outside, Atlanta moved the way it always moved, indifferent, continuous, entirely unaware that the woman standing at a kitchen window on the north side of the city had just become one of the wealthiest people in it. Cole's morning began at 7:15. Shower suit the charcoal, his default for Tuesday's coffee from the pot. She had already made a glance at his phone while he stood at the counter. He had 2 messages and a calendar reminder. She watched him read them from across the kitchen, his expression doing the small, efficient adjustments of a man processing his day. He kissed her cheek on the way out. Said he'd be late. Didn't ask about her plans. The door closed. She listened to his car back out of the driveway, the sound of it at the end of the street. Then silence. She picked up her phone and called Patricia. "File everything this morning," she said. "The divorce petition, the criminal complaint for the forgery, and the asset protection order on the trust." "Already scheduled for 9 a.m., Patricia said. "The sheriff's office will serve Cole at his firm at 11. I wanted to make sure he was in the building." Eileen thought about Cole at his desk on the 14th floor of the Perryman building, the office with the glass wall he was so proud of the view of Midtown. He had described to her the day he got the promotion, like a man describing something he had always deserved. "Good," she said. The documents reached Cole at 11:23. Patricia had a contact at the sheriff's office, not an improper one, simply a professional relationship built over 2 decades of filing documents that required delivery, and he called her at 11:31 to confirm service. She called Eileen at 11:32. He has them. Eileen was at Patricia's office. She had been there since 9, sitting in the chair across from Patricia's desk, working through the trust transition documentation with the methodical focus of a woman who had been waiting a very long time for the right paperwork to arrive. She did not react visibly when Patricia said it. She nodded once, turned back to the page she had been reviewing, and said, "What's next?" Cole called her at 11:47. She let it ring. He called again at 11:51. Then a text Eileen. "Call me. Now." Then another, "What is this? What have you done?" Then 4 minutes after that, a single word that told her everything about the state of his understanding Eileen. She turned her phone face down on Patricia's desk. Patricia looked at her over her glasses. "He'll call his lawyer next," Eileen said. "He already has," Patricia said. "Raymond Chu, good attorney. He'll read the prenup tonight and call Cole in the morning with news Cole is not going to enjoy." "How long before they see the trust documentation?" "It's attached to the divorce filing. Raymond will have it this afternoon." Patricia paused. "That's when it gets interesting." Raymond Chu called Patricia at 3:44 in the afternoon. Eileen was still in the office. She heard Patricia's half of the conversation from across the desk, the measured responses, the single pause that stretched 4 seconds longer than normal, the careful professional neutrality of a woman who had been waiting for this specific phone call for 4 years and intended to enjoy absolutely none of it visibly. "Yes, Raymond. Warren Family Trust LLC. Correct. No full beneficial ownership. Yes." Another pause. "The prenuptial agreement is clear on the matter. Any trust assets predating the marriage are sole property. Yes, I drafted it. Yes, he signed it." A longer pause now. "I understand. We'll see you Thursday." She hung up, looked at Eileen. Raymond Chu just found out his client signed away any claim to $72 billion in a lobby 11 minutes after receiving the document. Eileen said nothing. "He did not take that well," Patricia added. "Cole came home at 6. He looked like a man who had spent 7 hours being told things he did not want to hear. The charcoal suit was still pressed. He would never allow that to slip in public, but his jaw carried the particular tension of someone who had been clenching it since noon. He set his keys on the counter harder than usual. A small thing. She noticed it. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her across the room. "Warren Family Trust," he said. Not a question. An attempt at a statement that came out sounding like neither. She was at the counter cutting vegetables. She did not stop. "What is Warren Family Trust, Eileen?" She set down the knife, turned to face him, looked at him the way she had looked at Vivian 6 days ago in a room of 41 people with a patience so complete it had its own weight. "It's mine, Cole," she said. The words were simple. 4 of them. She had not planned them, specifically had not rehearsed. This moment had not scripted a speech or prepared a revelation. She had simply told the truth in the plainest available language. He stared at her. "How?" "My grandfather built it. My grandfather left it to me. Your name is not on it, has never been on it, and cannot be on it." She picked up the knife again. "Raymond will explain the rest." "Eileen, I'm making dinner, Cole." He stood in the doorway for a long moment. She heard his breathing change, the particular quality of a man whose entire framework for a situation has just been removed and who does not yet know what to replace it with. He did not come further into the kitchen. He went upstairs. She heard his footsteps on the ceiling above her moving back and forth the way they did when he was on the phone, then stopping, then starting again. She finished the vegetables, started the rice, set the table for one. The name meant nothing to him yesterday. She had said so then. It meant everything now. And by Thursday, when Raymond Chu and Patricia Holt sat across from each other in a conference room with a judge's clerk present, it would mean something to everyone. The courtroom was smaller than people imagined. Not the grand marble spaces of television dramas, just a civil hearing room on the 4th floor of the Fulton County Courthouse, pale walls, fluorescent lights supplemented by 2 narrow windows that looked out onto a parking structure, 12 rows of gallery seating, a witness stand that had heard 10,000 ordinary disputes, a judge's bench that was slightly too high for the room, giving it an unintentional grandeur. Eileen arrived at 8:45 with Patricia. She wore the dark navy dress, no jewelry. Her hair pulled back simply the way her grandfather had always preferred. "You don't need ornament, Eileen, you need presence." She carried nothing except a small leather folder Patricia had given her that morning, containing 1 page, a single summary document she would not need to reference, but that felt important to hold. Patricia had dressed for a verdict. Navy blazer white blouse, the reading glasses she only wore when she intended to be taken seriously by people who did not yet know they should take her seriously. They sat at the plaintiff's table and waited. Cole arrived at 9:02 with Raymond Chu. He looked like he had not slept. The charcoal suit was impeccable. She understood by now that the suit was armor that Cole Myers would go to his own collapse in a perfectly pressed jacket, but his face had the quality of something that had been carefully assembled that morning and was already beginning to show the effort. Raymond Chu was compact, precise, a man whose reputation Patricia had described as formidable and whose expression this morning communicated the specific strain of someone defending a position he privately knew was indefensible. Vivian entered 2 minutes later. She had not been required to attend. She had come anyway, which told Eileen everything about what Vivian believed this morning would be. A final negotiation. A settlement that would protect the Myers name, contain the damage, allow everyone to walk away with their architecture intact. She sat in the first row of the gallery directly behind Cole. Black dress, high neck, her white hair pulled back in its usual severity. She looked once at Eileen across the room, with the expression she had worn at 100 dinners, the assessment, the dismissal, the half-second calculation. Eileen looked back at her calmly and then looked away first, not because she was conceding anything, but because Vivian Myers was no longer the most important person in this room. Judge Renata Cole entered at 9:15. She was 58 years old, wore her robes with the ease of someone who had stopped noticing them 2 decades ago, and had the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people whose authority is so established it no longer requires demonstration. She sat, reviewed the documents in front of her, did not look up for 45 seconds. When she did, she looked at Patricia. Ms. Holt, this is a divorce proceeding with attached civil and criminal complaints. I've reviewed the filing. Before we address the criminal matter, I want to establish the asset picture for the record. She looked down at the documents again. The Warren Family Trust, LLC. Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said. You are representing the beneficial owner of this trust. I am. Judge Renata Cole looked at the paper in front of her. Then she looked up, not at Patricia, not at Raymond Chu, not at Cole. She looked directly at Eileen with the measured attention of a woman who had learned to identify the person in the room who actually mattered. Ms. Myers, she said, I want the record to be completely clear on this point. She looked back at the document. Warren Family Trust, LLC, as of this past Tuesday, transferred full beneficial ownership to Eileen Christine Myers, née Warren. The trust holds diversified assets across commercial real estate, renewable energy infrastructure, and global logistics operations. A pause not dramatic, simply the pause of a woman reading carefully. The trust has been independently valued at $72 billion. The number entered the room the way a stone enters water. Not loudly, just completely. Cole's chair moved, not much, an inch, maybe less. The involuntary shift of a body receiving information the mind has not yet processed. Eileen heard it from across the room, the small scrape of it against the floor, and did not look at him. She looked at Judge Renata Cole, who had returned to her documents with the equanimity of a woman for whom large numbers were a professional matter. Raymond Chu wrote something on his legal pad, then stopped writing, then put his pen down. Behind Cole, Vivian's hands found the railing in front of her gallery seat. Both hands, the knuckles even from across the room visible. Tara Weston was in the back row of the gallery. She'd arrived, late, slipped in quietly, and Eileen had noted her without acknowledging her the moment she entered. Now in the silence that followed the number, Eileen heard the specific sound of a folding seat being released. Footsteps. The soft mechanical close of the courtroom door. Tara Weston left before the session was 5 minutes old. Nobody stopped her. Nobody called after her. She simply performed the calculation that the number required and arrived at her conclusion faster than anyone else in the room. The criminal complaint was addressed next. Patricia presented the forgery documentation with the efficiency of someone who had organized 412 pages into a 20-minute presentation. The forensic handwriting analysis, the loan agreement, the wire transfer, the property deed, the NDA and its payment trail connecting back to the forged account. Raymond Chu objected twice. Judge Renata Cole overruled both. Cole sat through it without speaking. His jaw was the jaw from last night, the tension of a man who had been clenching it since Tuesday and had run out of positions to adjust. Eileen watched him from her peripheral vision, not staring, not performing anything, just aware of him, the way you remain aware of a thing that used to be the center of your life and has since been correctly reclassified. At one point, he turned and looked at her directly. A long look. The kind that wanted something, an explanation, a reversal, some indication that there had been a mistake that could still be corrected. She met his eyes briefly. Then Patricia said, "Your Honor," and Eileen returned her attention to the front of the room. At 11:47, Vivian leaned forward from her gallery seat and said something to Raymond Chu in what she intended to be a whisper. It was not a whisper. "Why didn't anyone find this? I told you to check everything about that woman before the wedding." The court reporter's fingers did not stop moving. Judge Renata Cole looked up from her papers, looked at the gallery, said nothing, returned to her papers. The record now contained Vivian Myers stating in a Fulton County courtroom that she had instructed someone to investigate Eileen before her marriage to Cole, a statement that would matter in ways Vivian had not yet begun to calculate. Patricia stood at the conclusion of the session. "Your Honor, the plaintiff requests that the record reflect one statement for the proceedings." Judge Renata Cole nodded. Patricia looked at Eileen. Eileen stood. The room, what remained of it, looked at her. Cole, Raymond Chu, Vivian still gripping the railing, the court reporter, the clerk, the bailiff near the door. Eileen looked at Judge Renata Cole and said in the same voice she used to say, "Everything is fine," across a dinner table, in the same voice she had used every day for 4 years in a house where she had been invisible, "I think the record speaks for itself, Your Honor." She sat down. Judge Renata Cole almost smiled. "I believe it does, Ms. Myers," she said. "I believe it does." The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran the story on a Thursday morning. Not front page, civil proceedings rarely warranted that, but prominent enough. Page 3 of the Metro section above the fold, with a headline that was careful in its language and devastating in its implications. Myers' attorney admits pre-wedding investigation of wife in Fulton County hearing. The byline belonged to a court reporter who had been in the gallery and had apparently excellent shorthand. Eileen read it at Patricia's office over coffee. She read it once, set it down, and did not read it again. It said what it said. The record said what the record said. She had learned from her grandfather that the most powerful thing a true statement can do is exist. It requires no amplification, no defense, no performance of outrage. You simply let it stand in the room and allow other people to reckon with it. Other people were reckoning. Cole's firm called him at 8:15 that morning. Not his direct line, the managing partner's assistant called his cell, which meant the managing partner had seen the article before 8 and had spent 15 minutes deciding what the correct response was, before concluding that the correct response was a phone call that required his assistant to make rather than himself. Cole was placed on administrative leave pending internal review. The language was careful, the way all language is careful, when institutions are managing the distance between a person and the damage he has done. Administrative leave meant we need you not to be here while we determine how much of this attaches to us. It meant the glass wall office with the midtown view will be occupied by someone else for the foreseeable future. It meant the name Myers, which had opened doors in this city for 40 years, had developed overnight a draft. Patricia's contact at the firm, a paralegal who had worked there for 11 years and had her own opinions about Cole Myers that she had kept professionally to herself, called to confirm at 9:02. Patricia relayed the information to Eileen without commentary. Eileen nodded, turned back to the trust transition document she had been reviewing. "The property order," she said. "The Buckhead condominium. Frozen as of yesterday afternoon," Patricia said. "The court accepted our argument that it was purchased with fraudulently obtained funds. Tara Weston's LLC cannot sell, transfer, or refinance until the criminal matter resolves." Eileen thought about a burgundy dress moving through a room. About a woman who had performed her own calculation on a Thursday morning in a courtroom and left before the first session was 5 minutes old. Has she been in contact with Cole? Patricia opened a folder. Her attorney contacted Raymond Chu yesterday evening. She is cooperating with the criminal investigation in exchange for immunity consideration on the NDA matter. Not surprised, not hurt, just noted, filed. The final piece of a structure completing itself with the mechanical certainty of something that had always been going to end this way. Vivian's statement reached the symphony board by Friday afternoon. Eileen did not know the exact mechanism, whether someone on the board had seen the article, whether a colleague had forwarded the court transcript, whether Vivian herself had attempted to get ahead of it with an explanation that had not landed the way she intended. It didn't matter. What mattered was the outcome. Vivian Myers was asked, in a letter delivered by the board's legal counsel, to step back from her committee chairmanship while the board reviewed the matter. 40 years, 2 decades of galas and donor relationships, and the particular architecture of a woman who had built her entire identity on being indispensable to rooms that now quietly were rearranging themselves around her absence. Eileen heard about this through Patricia, who heard it through a board member who was also a client. She did not feel satisfied. That was the thing people misunderstood about moments like this. They imagined the person who had been wronged would feel the particular bright heat of vindication, the sharp pleasure of watching a structure collapse. But Eileen had been carrying this for too long, and with too much care for it to feel like pleasure. It felt like completion. The closing of a long equation that had always had only one solution. Cole called her on Saturday morning. She was at the Peachtree Roadhouse, her grandfather's house, which she had quietly maintained through the trust for 4 years, which Cole had never known existed. She had slept here the night of the hearing and the night after in the room that had been hers from age 9. The high ceilings and dark wood and the smell of old paper and leather unchanged, as though the house had simply waited. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. He sounded different. Not the controlled professional voice, not the performance of Tuesday evenings over takeout. Just a man. Tired and reduced and sitting somewhere in a version of his life that no longer resembled the one he had constructed. "I didn't know," he said. "About the trust? I didn't know what you were." She sat with that for a moment. "I know you didn't," she said. "If I had known, Cole." She said his name the way her grandfather had said things that required stopping. "If you had known, you would have married the trust. You would have married the $72 billion. You would have been very attentive and very present and very careful, and I would have spent the rest of my life wondering whether any of it was real." She paused. "My grandfather understood that. He built the trust the way he did so I would find out what I actually had. I found out." Silence on the line. Outside the window, the Peachtree Road garden was moving in a light wind. Her grandfather's roses still maintained by the same groundskeeper he had employed for 16 years. "I'm sorry, Eileen," Cole said finally. She believed him. That was the complicated thing. She believed the apology was genuine, that somewhere in the wreckage of his constructed life, he had located something real and was offering it. It did not change anything. It was simply true, and she was someone who had always been willing to let true things be true without requiring them to be useful. "I know," she said. She did not say it was all right. She did not say she forgave him. She said "I know" because that was the accurate thing, and accuracy had always been her first language. She ended the call. Set the phone on her grandfather's desk, looked out at the garden for a long moment, then she opened the trust transition folder Patricia had sent and went back to work. The last thing to fall was the quietest. 2 weeks after the hearing, Tara Wesson's attorney filed her cooperation agreement with the court. The monthly payments, 18 months, $4,000 originating from a forged loan, were entered into evidence. The NDA was voided. The condominium remained frozen pending the criminal resolution. Nobody called Eileen to tell her. Nobody needed to. Patricia sent a 2-line message: cooperation agreement filed. Criminal charges proceeding. You don't need to do anything. She read it on her phone while standing in the Warren Global Holdings building lobby, a building she had technically owned for 4 years and was walking into for the first time as herself. Marble floors, a reception desk staffed by 2 people who had worked here for a decade and were meeting their beneficial owner for the first time. She put her phone in her pocket, walked toward the elevator. She did not watch them fall. She was already somewhere else entirely. The office on the 31st floor had been her grandfather's. Not his primary office that had been a smaller room 2 floors down. Practical and deliberately understated the office of a man who understood that the most powerful people in any building are rarely in the most impressive rooms. But this one, the 31st floor corner with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of Atlanta spreading south toward the horizon, had been his thinking room. The place he came when a decision required more space than a desk could provide. He had brought her here once when she was 14. Had stood with her at the window and said nothing for almost 5 minutes. Just let her look. Let the city arrange itself in front of her, the grid of it, the movement, the way light changed across buildings at different distances. Then, all of this is just decisions, Eileen. Someone decided where every road goes. Someone decided how tall every building stands. The world looks fixed. It isn't. It's just the accumulated weight of choices that people made and then stopped questioning. She had not fully understood it at 14. She understood it now. She arrived at Warren Global Holdings at 7:45 on a Monday morning 3 weeks after the hearing. The building staff had been notified the previous week by Patricia Professional Factual No Ceremony. Eileen Myers, beneficial owner of Warren Family Trust, LLC, will be assuming active oversight of Warren Global Holdings effective Monday. Please ensure her access credentials are prepared. A memo that had traveled through an organization of 4,000 people and arrived back to Patricia through various channels with a collective response that amounted to, "We have been waiting." The receptionist, a woman named Donna, who had worked the lobby desk for 9 years and whose handshake was the firmest Eileen encountered that morning, said simply, "Good morning, Ms. Myers. Your grandfather spoke about you often." Eileen stopped. "Did he?" she said. Not a question exactly. More the sound of a person receiving a gift they had not known was waiting. "Every time he came through this lobby," Donna said. "Every single time." Eileen held that for a moment. Let it settle in the place where things that matter settle. "Thank you, Donna," she said. She walked to the elevator, pressed 31. The office was exactly as she remembered. Someone had prepared it fresh flowers on the credenza, the blinds adjusted to the morning light, a legal pad and 2 pens on the desk, with the particular precision of people who had cared for this space for years and wanted its new occupant to feel that care. The mahogany desk that had belonged to Theodore Warren Sr. Still solid, still present. The kind of furniture built in an era that assumed permanence. She set her leather folder on the desk, sat in the chair, looked out at Atlanta. The city was doing what it always did, moving, assembling, indifferent to the specific weight of the morning. Traffic on the connector below, a plane crossing the upper right corner of the window at a distance that made it silent. The midtown skyline standing the way it always stood, unchanged, the way cities are unchanged by the private upheavals of the people living inside them. She thought about Cole's office in the Perryman building. The glass wall, the midtown view he had described to her like a man describing something he had always deserved. She had never told him she owned 3 floors of the building he was looking out from. The ring was in the top drawer. Patricia had retrieved it through the court order, a line item in the asset settlement, small enough that Raymond Chu had not contested it, significant enough that Patricia had made certain it was included. It arrived in a manila envelope with a custody receipt attached, delivered to Patricia's office on a Wednesday, transferred to Eileen on a Thursday with no commentary from either of them because none was needed. She had placed it in the drawer the morning she moved into the office. Had not opened the drawer since. Now she did. The ring sat against the plain manila of the envelope interior, a simple band, not elaborate. The ring Cole had chosen because Vivian had advised restraint for what she already considered a temporary arrangement. It had seemed meaningful once, in the specific way that objects become meaningful when you believe in what they represent. She had worn it every day for 4 years, had noticed its absence on her finger, the way you notice the absence of something that has become part of your body's vocabulary. She looked at it for a long time. Then she placed it back in the envelope, folded the top over once, set it at the back of the drawer beneath the legal pad her grandfather had left there, still containing his handwriting notes from a meeting she would never know the context of, in the careful, forward-leaning script she had known since childhood. She closed the drawer, did not lock it. Some things did not need to be locked away. They needed simply to be put in their correct place and left there. Patricia arrived at 9 with 2 coffees and the week's transition agenda. They worked through it at the conference table by the window introductions, with the division heads that afternoon, a board briefing Thursday, the external audit timeline, the communications strategy for the trust's public emergence after 4 years of deliberate invisibility. Practical things. The architecture of a life being rebuilt not from damage, but from a foundation that had always been there waiting. At 11, Patricia closed her folder, looked at Eileen across the table with the expression she reserved for moments that did not require professional language. "How are you?" she asked. Simply, the way her grandfather used to ask it, not as a formality, as a real inquiry. Eileen looked out the window. The city was still moving, still indifferent, still doing exactly what it always did, regardless of what happened inside any building within it. "I'm all right," she said. Not today necessarily, but all right. In the way her grandfather had promised her once in a school hallway with frosted glass windows, in a voice that made promises feel like arrangements. "He would have been proud," Patricia said. Eileen did not answer immediately. She let the statement exist in the room the way true statements deserve to exist, without being managed or redirected or qualified. "I know," she said finally. "I think he already was." Patricia picked up her coffee. Eileen picked up hers. Outside, Atlanta moved in the late morning light, the accumulated weight of choices that people had made, and then stopped questioning. Somewhere in it, a courtroom was processing paperwork. Somewhere in it, a man in a charcoal suit was learning the specific shape of what he had walked away from. Somewhere in it, a white-haired woman was sitting in a house full of rooms she had built and finding them for the first time insufficient. And on the 31st floor of a building on Peachtree Road, a woman sat at her grandfather's desk with coffee cooling in her hands, and the whole city laid out in front of her like a question she already knew the answer to. She had never needed to be loud. She had never needed to be seen. Strength, her grandfather had told her once, is not the thing that breaks through walls. It is the thing that was already on the other side waiting. Quiet, steady, and entirely hers. The lesson I keep coming back to from Eileen's story isn't about $72 billion. It isn't about a ring or a courtroom or a man who signed a document in 11 minutes without reading it. It's about what happens when a woman decides that her silence is not a concession, it's a strategy. That knowing your own worth doesn't require anyone else's acknowledgement to be real. That the most dangerous thing you can be to people who have underestimated you is patient. Eileen didn't win because she was loud. She didn't win because she performed her pain in rooms where people could applaud her for surviving it. She won because she understood something her grandfather spent a lifetime trying to teach: that power. Real power doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives. And by the time the people who dismissed you understand what they were standing next to you are already somewhere else entirely. If this story touched something you've carried quietly, a marriage where you made yourself smaller, a room where your name was written in pencil while everyone else got ink, a moment where someone took something from you in front of witnesses and called it appropriate, drop it in the comments. Tell me your country and your local time. I read every single one, and I want to know where in the world you're watching from. If you're not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Hit that button, leave a like if this story stayed with you, and come back, because there is so much more where this came from. Take care of yourselves. And remember, they never need to know what you're holding. Not until the moment you're ready to set it down.